Hello. This particular chapter we're going to be dealing with the blood. And when we discuss the medical terminology associated with the blood, there are a lot of medical combining forms that we will utilize on a regular basis. Some of them may be referring to the blood itself. Some of them may be referring to the vessels that the blood travels through. So for example, here on the board I wrote a few terms. Okay. Hemato means blood, so hemato is a combining form that means blood. The suffix oma means tumor, and if we combine the two, hematoma is a blood tumor. We typically refer to a hematoma as a bruise, but in actuality it is a blood tumor. Then this particular combining form, angio. Angio is a combining form that means vessel. Here we have a suffix plasty, which refers to surgical repair. When we combine the two, we get angioplasty, which is a surgical repair of a vessel. Many of you may have heard of the term angioplasty, as it's a term utilized to describe a process where a blocked artery that surrounds the heart is opened up so new blood flow can go to the heart. Now, these are just a few combining forms and suffixes which you may find out are logically going to be attributed to the blood and the vessels associated with moving the blood. But the blood itself is going to be composed of two components: plasma, which is about 55% of whole blood volume. And the biggest component of plasma is water. If a patient has high blood pressure, the first medication that a physician might put them on is a water pill. If the patient goes to the restroom more often throughout the day, they diurese, in other words, they produce more urine, that leads to less overall plasma volume, and therefore that decreases the whole blood content in the body and decreases the pressure up against the vessel walls, so their blood pressure is lower. The other components of whole blood are the formed elements. Red blood cells, red blood cells transport oxygen to every cell in the body, and then as soon as they give up that oxygen, they're going to pick up the waste product, carbon dioxide, from all the cells in the body and transport it back to the heart. Ultimately, that carbon dioxide will be released from the respiratory system, the lungs, and that's how we rid our body of this carbon dioxide. It keeps it from building up in our body that way. White blood cells. White blood cells are going to be important because they give us immunity. White blood cells fight off foreign invaders. Maybe it's a bacteria, maybe it's a virus, maybe it's a fungus. But white blood cells are going to be important because they provide our body immunity. This immunity, again, protects us from all of the pathogens, as they're called, which are foreign invaders trying to get into our body and replicate themselves and ultimately cause us to have an infection. The third component of the formed elements are platelets. Platelets are clotting cells. These clotting cells are going to be important if we injure ourselves so we don't lose a large amount of blood. So ultimately, the formed elements are made up of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. The vast majority of the formed elements are red blood cells. We're made up of trillions of cells, so we need an overwhelming amount of oxygen-rich blood going to all of our cells, and that's the job of the red blood cell. And then in turn, as the cells perform their basic functions, metabolism as it's called, Those red blood cells pick up the waste product of metabolism called carbon dioxide. Our white blood cells, there are a multitude of white blood cells in our body, each of which has its own function in preserving our system from getting infected by various pathogens. We have white blood cells that are specific to fungus. We have white blood cells that's specific to infections, to viruses. So all of them ultimately have a specific purpose in protecting our body. And then finally, platelets. Platelets, again, are going to keep us from being injured and bleeding and losing significant amounts of blood. But the chapter that we're going to cover now is the blood. And again, its two major components are the plasma, which is about 55% of whole blood content, and it's made up mostly of water, and the formed elements, which are the red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets that make up the other 45% of whole blood. So we look forward to exploring the medical terminology and anatomy and physiology of the blood.